State Representative Tacky Chan of Quincy is here for our weekly Tacky Talk podcast. Hey, Tacky, how are you?
Hey Joe, good to see you again. Happy to be back on the fact that winter hasn't left us.
Yes, this is March and April we're having this year.
April 10th, around noontime, the sun is reaching high and my heat is still on. As you all know, today I'm home. Yesterday I was in the State House for a vote regarding us un, un, unexpected money from the millionaire's tax. It was our vote yesterday. Uh, Even I didn't expect there was any possibility of extra millionaire's tax money.
Oh, nice. How much?
It was originally we put in the budget $1 billion. The projection from various economists and tax policy people thought that the initial year, fiscal year 25 was going to be between 700 million and 2.1-ish billion dollars. So that was kind of a crazy broad range of a non-consensus group of what the number could be. So last year's budget put in $1 billion as a conservative number. And then revenues are finally finalizing post October. And Department of Revenue informs us that we have like almost $1.3 billion plus, give or take a fraction, available. 15% of that money goes into a reserve account for future transportation education. As you may know or remember, the voters, not me, the voters, approved a constitutional amendment to add a 4% tax on every dollar after the first million, of which must go to education and transportation. And the legislature has discretion on what aspects of education and transportation to spend money on. So this is new revenue that is non-discretionary revenue in the sense that, for example, I can't put this money to public health, or I can't put this money to the environment, or I can't put this money to special projects that are not related to transportation and education.
Gotcha. Okay. So it kind of fell right in the middle of the projections, actually, which, not the high end, not the low end, right kind of in the middle.
Oh no, this is the high end. It's 1.3 on top of the 1 billion.
Oh, on top of. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, this was a surprise to everybody.
Oh, so 2.3 billion total?
Yes, I mean,
Oh, oh, okay. Very good. All right. Quincy gonna get any part of that?
no, not directly. Yeah, obviously, we're using this to prepare a buffer against potential federal programs that are lost, and also to pay for real costs associated with the changing economy and education and transportation. As you all may know, the MBTA is a huge priority for us. We do have the Transportation Committee working on it. But I mean, we put $400 million into MBTA workforce safety reserves, reading off my sheet here. Total transportation expenditures, 828 million of the 1.3 billion is going to be for transportation. Predominantly MBTA driven, $400 million for workforce safety, 300 million for the deficiency fund, 60 million for physical infrastructure. That goes right to MBTA plus $20 million for reduced fares for low income folks. The summer tunnel reimbursement, the MBTA has to pay reimbursement for the summer tunnel usage. Regional transportation authorities, which is well outside the MBTA service areas, getting 20 million. And the state fund regarding unpaid roads, or in other words, road work, that's emergency road work, is getting 10 million. And then we're also putting some money back into our schools as well. $50 million for capital improvement for vocational schools, $10 million to continue our universal meals program in public schools, $109 million for circuit breaker reimbursement. Circuit breaker is when you run into a situation where you have kids coming to your school system they didn't expect. So we call that circuit breaker in the sense that you have your municipal budgets have been adversely impacted from kids migrating around. So it can be a situation where homeless or a fire or a family moves in or some combination of that situation. So it's actually pretty substantial share at $190 million we're putting in, because $190 million indicates there's a lot of migration of families in the state to trigger that. We do some stuff for UMass endowment, 10 million, green work schools, making more energy efficient schools, 10 million. We have 1.5 million for English language classes. As you all know, we have a lot of refugees and immigrants in the state. And then we do some workforce affordability and quality school improvements for 40 million. And then we also have some Student Opportunity Act stuff for 58 million, which is part of the education reform we did last time. And Katie Dukakis, I know she's passed away. My condolence to her and her family, the Dukakis family, but she was also working, I believe, on if I remember correctly, a Holocaust museum, and puts about $5 million in reserve towards that project that Katie Dukakis is working on. And then we're going to have the Inspector General also look at best practice regarding procurement on transportation services, because transportation is very expensive, and we're going to ask Inspector General to look at procurement services not just at our level but also at the municipal level as well.
Oh, okay. So, in terms of what, purchasing new equipment for the T?
No, purchasing stuff in general for transportation.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that's coming online soon was actually already coming online is electrification.
Mm-hmm.
We are requiring municipalities, businesses to expand their electrical vehicle truck fleet,
Mm-hmm.
as well as electrical vehicles. And coming up in the next 4 or so years, we're going to require car sales in New England. It's not just us. New England is basically doing, I think Maine may be, New Hampshire, no, New Hampshire is the only one of the 6 states not doing it. Require more electrical car vehicles available to be sold in Massachusetts. So that's part of the question of how we're going to do procurements, and we'll have the IG
Okay.
stuff.
Okay, so available for sale, but not mandating selling them.
The government will be required to increase their fleet over time.
Oh, the government. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
The private sector will as well. It's a bit of the trucking industry in particular is going to be a tough one, particularly by things like school buses.
Yeah. Or
So
snowplows. Can't have electric snowplows, I don't think.
that's correct. So we'll have the IG look into the procurement process, regarding the feasibility of some of this stuff.
Yeah.
They'll report back to us once they have an idea what the procurement process is and if there's any problems in the process.
Okay. So, I mean, Quincy will benefit indirectly from the millionaire's tax. There's 4 T stations in the city. There's certainly a large public school system that could benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no secret that the T has financial problems for years now. It's all come to a head. And this is a big city. People do forget it's an immigrant city, it's a refugee city, and there's a lot of migration of kids moving in and out of the system at the moment. It seems like we lost on people that we are, a huge portion of our population, relatively speaking,
Yes,
is
for
not
sure. No question. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we did yesterday. It's been sent to the Senate. We'll see what the Senate's recommendations are back before we go through a conference committee process. But yeah, this was a surprise. So before people jump on me about getting a tax rebate, but this is constitutionally mandated spending,
Mhm.
not discretionary in the sense that I can give this money back to you. This is the
Yeah.
Constitution that you all voted for to say we're going to do it this way.
Right. I remember when it passed, there was great concern about people, millionaires, if you will, fleeing Massachusetts because of the tax. So is it safe to say that hasn't happened?
No, it still could happen. I mean, let's not presume it's not going to happen. I mean, generally it takes about 3 tax year cycles as people make their adjustments in life. It does happen. I do to happen at some level. I do expect also natural attrition as people decide to move to warmer weather. This is not uncommon. And they sell their homes. This doesn't seem to be a massive sale of homes still. I do think people are holding on to their homes in Massachusetts because their valuation increases. And the part-time residents, they buy cheaper property in warmer weather, or they hope to buy cheaper property in warmer weather right now because the interest rates are still awful high and property nationally is not cheap on average. But I truly believe that people are not selling their homes. They're keeping their homes here. So there's still massive vacancy massive lack of vacancy. There's not enough property to buy. And people are kind of holding on to the valuation up here. The question really is on cheating taxes in Massachusetts. New York is actually having this problem now. They're actually catching fraud, where people quote unquote change their residency, but did they change their residency? So, New York is actively chasing down these folks regarding on whether or not they're cheating on their taxes. Whether we do that or not, it's something we should be considering as we continue down the road.
I see. Okay. So yeah, so they're claiming residency in a lower tax state, basically.
And and they hold the properties here.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
You're not selling your principal homes. I mean, if there was I repeat over and over again, if there's a massive exodus of people, we should have a lot of housing available.
Hmm.
And we don't have a lot of housing available, even in wealthy communities. There's not a lot of housing available in
Hmm.
the high rent districts, so to speak, the high property tax areas, right? There's not like a 10% availability. But everyone's citing data all the time. Everyone's leaving Massachusetts. Well, if you're leaving, why are there no homes available?
Hmm.
Why are there
Yeah.
no vacancies and rentals? I mean, the rhetoric, which is data driven, does not reflect the property market. So clearly something is wrong.
So well, yeah. So they may they may be, you know, leaving to live someplace else, but they're not selling the properties here.
Yeah, because the value of the property is extremely high here.
Yeah, and if you're locked in a low interest loan, I mean that's valuable. You're going to hold on to that. You know, if your interest rate is 3% on your mortgage, then you're making money right now.
And depending on your circumstances and your finances, particularly in a wealthier area, you could leverage your principal residence for a second residence out of state.
Mm-hmm.
You have
True.
collateral.
Yep.
So again, I can't speak to it, but I love the fact that people only point to one data point, but they ignore the second half of the problem. It's like people are leaving. We have a problem, but we have a housing crisis. Yeah, that doesn't sink.
Right. Right. Gotcha.
Again, common sense, folks. This isn't
Yeah.
hard to understand.
So I mean, if I mean, yeah, they're still paying taxes in Massachusetts.
Maybe.
Depending.
Depending. So I suspect at some point down the road, I mean, I'm hoping the Department of Revenue starts making recommendations about increasing investigators. It's certain state agencies make you more money than you put in. Department of Revenue investigators are one of them.
Yeah, that's the role, right? Inspector General, you mentioned, Attorney
Mhm.
General, perhaps as well.
Correct. Attorney General, obviously pursues and defends states' lawsuits
Hmm.
regarding actors, and they have consumer powers. And sometimes we get defrauded too. And the AG chases those folks down, as well as class actions on behalf of residents. That sometimes we get little bucks back into our coffers. That's very unpredictable. Who knows when the case is going to settle?
Right. Yeah.
Fines, fees, and compliances. So obviously, I oversee the boards of registration, the division of professional licensure, and anytime they slap somebody for a violation, that can be a fee, right?
Mhm.
Same thing happens at the ABCC, the Alcohol
Mhm.
Beverage Control Commission. I mean, they go after people for fines and fees too. And of course, when there's growing business, local government gets licensing fees too for liquor licenses, for example, permitting of construction, permitting of restaurants, permitting of new businesses, right? There's fees associated at the municipal level. So, when there's economic slowdowns, obviously businesses will stop growing or they go away, and then those fees also go away too.
Right.
That's kind of waiting for the other shoe to fall here regarding the state of the current economy. And what was I said other day, I'm not a magic 8 ball. I can't tell exactly how it's going to work out.
No, nobody can, because I mean, in the since we talked last week, Jackie, the country's economy has just gone in a whirlwind.
Yeah, liberation of our money.
Yes, and now the 90-day pause on these tariffs, getting all our money back, supposedly.
Well, 90-day pause on certain tariffs. So let's get some clarity here. In the stock market, if you have a 529 investment for your child's college fund, or your 401k, 457, 403bs, if you're a pension fund manager for government or private sector, this has been a rough week for those folks as they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that they don't lose money. And at the same time, maybe you do your own investments. The Federal Reserve has said that over 50% of the public is somehow tied to the market.
Hmm.
And the market includes things like savings bonds. Don't delude yourself. The bonds are not part of the market. They're actually a relationship between the stock market and the bond market. So You throw in all those folks that, buy treasuries for the grandchildren, for example. I mean, the number of people invested in the market is really, it's a great part of our economy. So where are we, guys? So today, the president indicated that we have 145% tariff against Chinese import goods. These goods are not just Chinese companies. These are U.S. companies as well who produce in China and sell the goods back. As I've said in the past, one of the interesting problems with tariffs is that sometimes goods go back and forth more than one time. Meanwhile, the Chinese government has implemented, I believe, up to 85%, but I'm going to guarantee it's much more than that coming soon against us, which means that and they're doing everything, which includes raw materials. So soybeans, pork, and agriculture, but also things like copper, iron, and so forth. Because when people talk about cheap steel coming from China, which is true, where did the iron come from? The U.S. is a major export, as well as Australia, of raw hard materials to China. Another place that does it is South America. Argentina, Chile also has a lot of hard materials. China does have their own, but it's actually, like we talked before about moving stuff around the world. It's sometimes easier to buy more raw materials than it is to mine your own, because mining is expensive to do, and building new mines safely is very hard. So it's a multi-year investment to mine. So if you already have mines in America, mines in South America, mines in Australia, why just buy from them? Because the infrastructure. Right. So it's very tricky conversation, because if the Chinese are tariffing everything, including raw material, we're going to use iron for an example. Iron goes to China. China takes the steel, and maybe it's an American company doing that steel manufacturing, not a Chinese-owned company. So that's already been tariffed on the way in. Mm-hmm. Then the tariff comes back our side with 145%. So now you're being tariffed twice. So the company, U.S. company in China, is now paying that tariff for that entry of that raw material, because it's being paid.
Sell it back to their own country, yeah.
And then sell it back to us, to a different. So the Chinese, the company, not the residents, the company is now paying twice. And since that product does not stay in China mostly, most of it actually comes back to the U.S. The U.S. consumer is picking up two tariffs, potentially two tariffs on the Chinese tariff that's been put on that raw material that goes to a U.S.-owned company, and then flips back to the U.S., which is tariffed again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's gonna come out in the end price for sure.
Yeah, the Trump administration has this kind of like really interesting argument, like, oh, Amazon and Walmart have pricing power, right? They can make the Chinese company eat the tariffs. But what if that company in China manufacturing is not an actual Chinese company? Maybe it's an American company.
Right. Well, yet the stated goal is to bring those companies back into the United States. Whether or not that happens or not, it remains to be seen.
Well, Hyundai built a car plant, took 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, imagine bringing a steel plant back, or imagine a copper manufacturer, or glass manufacturer, or iPhone. The iPhone, Apple employs 1 million people in China, and the iPhone mega factory took 10 years to build. Mm. It was not a small project. That project included building brand new railway, brand new water, sewer, gas, electricity, and continued expansion of those infrastructures as the Apple City was built in China. And it took a decade to get there. But because of the high volume of product, and in fact, it's a 24/7 facility, and you may remember during COVID, people were sleeping in the factories trying to get stuff done. You had to build specialized rail system just to get them to ports.
Right.
So give you an idea of the volume we're talking about here. And some folks may be saying that, you can just put a plant anywhere. Well, it's a little more complex than that, because Apple's is in India, and they want to be in Vietnam, but the electrical, sewer, transportation infrastructure is not fully developed. Mm-hmm. Those governments need to build them, roads, electrical systems, water, sewer, make sure there's enough of it, access to train transport. I mean,
and housing for the workers, right?
And housing for workers, which also affects healthcare. As South Shore Hospital reminded us when we were there, that housing expansion means greater healthcare service regionally. And for the U.S., there's also educational expansion regarding educating people who have kids. So then
Yes.
that adds population to your school system. May not be the case over there. I can't speak to those countries, but I do know that in the US, that if you build anywhere, yeah, and you influx 5,000 people, at some point they're going to have families, they're going to need health care, and there's that kind of service cost expansion, which the government may have to pick apart a cost in terms of not just state or federal government, but the municipal and county government, depending what state we're talking.
Right, right.
Yes, yes.
Creating something from nothing.
Well, I'm telling you, taxpayers will have to pick up some of those costs on the public infrastructure side.
Right.
Hope that the economic development and taxes on the residents that work there actually flow back into the coffers of the municipality, the city, the state. Again, like all states are different. That's why I keep making these very broad statements about municipalities and counties and states, because not all of us are the same, as you know. So depending where they end up, there's a competition for that. Now, if you don't have natural gas, which is a legit problem in Western Mass, it actually inhibits industrial development.
Yep. Yeah, they don't have it down the Cape, a lot part of the Cape either. So yeah.
Yeah, and if you're like in a community that may have been, part of the Rust Belt devastation in the 80s and the 90s, a lot of the infrastructure may be gone too. Just because you were once industrial city and you're not. And getting tired of this like talking heads on CNBC and others talking about the manufacturing jobs. Now, I'm old enough to remember. You're old enough to remember where Massachusetts was a major manufacturer. Gardner was the furniture Massachusetts. Gardner was the furniture manufacturer of Massachusetts in the country.
Absolutely, yeah.
Watches were made in Waltham. Quincy obviously had the shipyard. Hingham had a shipyard.
Yes.
We made cogs. We made planes.
Oh yeah.
Textile.
Brockton was the shoe capital of New England. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you're old enough, you remember these things. I'm sure if you're younger, listening to me, like, what are you talking about, right? Those are now condos, but not really.
I remember it well. Attleboro was the jewelry capital. Taunton had silver mines. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. And then, during the 80s and 90s, because we're a country that has states compete for business, some states started offering low tax and high government infrastructure to lure business out of Massachusetts to their states, particularly southern states, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, all the so-called Rust Belt areas, start trying to lure manufacturing away from big cities to these more rural communities. And what they would do, like Raytheon's always my favorite example. Raytheon basically, said, give us a tax break or we're leaving. So we did before my time. I was still a teenager, but they said we will not take any jobs away as long as we get these tax breaks, which they did honor that agreement until the expiration agreement. The expiration agreement happened, and the Raytheon, which is now the Home Depot on Bergen Parkway, closed not long after those agreements ended, and because we basically gave them tax credits to build a factory in the South.
Right.
So let's stop this crap about the whole sucking jobs out of this country. Yeah, they suck jobs out of Massachusetts because they went to a southern state.
Right.
But the mistake those states have that we, for better or for worse, can is that we do have taxation. Some of those states don't.
Well, that's why they want to go there. Right.
Yeah, but we're able to invest our money into 128, the technology bill, changing how to do education. And most recently, we are the biotechnology capital of the planet, not just the country, the planet. People come here for biotech. So we're able to pivot. Meanwhile, some of these other communities that are low tax parts that are basically welfare states for the federal government at this stage in certain parts of those states never had the financial capacity to pivot their workforce into new things. Like we always talk about workforce training. It's like a continuous conversation every 5 years about where we have deficiencies and where we have the future and how do we expand our workforce and how do we get education out there. And it's imperfect. You guys don't know it's imperfect, but it's always a conversation every 5 or so years that we're like, okay, where are we? Where are we? And it doesn't matter what governor you have. It is a continued conversation regardless of governors. Political party, this is not a political party issue. This is economic interest of the state, no matter your political party. So other states don't do this. As a result, they can't pivot out. And like Charlotte, North Carolina is probably the best example of one that did. That they're rapidly trying to become looking more like Massachusetts in terms of technology. Norfolk, what state? Norfolk,
Virginia.
Virginia, but I think it's really Delaware, I think, is also trying to promote themselves similar to Massachusetts as an education, technology, biotech, healthcare hub, right? This is starting now in some of these states, some of us who have pivoted away from manufacturing to try to be more service industry. And this country is like 95% service industry now, right? We promote the fact we have intellectual property, we have innovation, we have a lot of capital to create innovation. So before these companies ever went to Mexico, they didn't go straight from Massachusetts to Mexico. They went from Massachusetts to like South Carolina. Eventually, they found themselves in Mexico because, I don't know, there's no taxes in South Carolina. You just basically had extra money to spend somewhere else.
Right. Huh, interesting. Yeah.
So, and then eventually they left Mexico. They go to China.
Well, yeah, that's capitalism, right? Just you follow your best trends.
Well, most of the plan is built on American money, and I think people don't realize that. I mean, not just post World War II, even pre World War II, right? We've always been the biggest GDP since the 19th century, well past 100 years, because we are the biggest GDP on the planet, which means money moves with America. And, despite depressions, recessions, and everything else, the raw materials we ship out, the stuff we manufacture, and, corporate private industry investments in other countries, or the banking, buying companies, buying stock, building factories,
right.
The quality of life there. And, I have a lot of question marks about, child labor, environmental issues. Don't get me wrong, I'm aware of it. But, countries like China and many others in the East, offered no taxes, free infrastructure construction. We'll build you everything in the hopes that they'll get their money back in the long term regarding job creation and elevated cost of living, which is what every country does. Me and my friend were having this conversation about the global economy, and the mistake that we all think here is that they all want to be Americans. People don't want to be Americans. People want quality of life of Americans. There's a difference. People want
there's a big difference. Yeah.
People want our level of quality of life, because once you have a taste of quality of life that we have, it's very hard to go backwards.
Oh yeah, I mean I can't imagine going from a first world to a third world country. That the culture shock would be unbelievable.
Yeah, one of my uncle's wife's family lived in China through the famines. I've met them many times now. Well, not many, like 4 times, but more than once. And, they grew up in famine periods where they had to share one coat, and the only jobs they had were government jobs, which were hard to get. And now they have iPhones. This is a huge shock for folks that, lived through famine periods and lived through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and now they're senior citizens who, for the first time, didn't go hungry. They had 3 meals, right? And they had a degree of wealth to live more comfortably, and they're not on government payroll. They're in some private sector job that was created by the government, inviting foreign investment to come into the country to do that. And that foreign investment is largely American investment.
Yeah.
But of course, they don't promote that in their country, because that means they depend on us. So, duh. Same in the U.S. We have a ton of foreign investment, from Europe, particularly the Dutch, the British. And we also have a lot of foreign investment from Japan, Korea, and China. And remember, it wasn't that long ago where every business was trying to court Chinese money when China was at its peak of economic development. And that was a continuous conversation. We need to get Chinese investment. But if you look at U.S. investment, I mean, it's not like U.S. companies have given up on investments. It's not like Main Street businesses are giving up on investment too. They people do renovate, people do build businesses. So, in terms of like the big global picture, yeah, we've been tied together for like 120 years. It's just people don't think about it, right? Spices came from India during the colonial period, right? During the 15, 16, 1700s, right? So, it's always been some variation of global trade. It's just that trade moves faster. And it's always been by sail or ship or cargo ship, right? Ships move all the goods on the planet. So, again, it's a little bit disingenuous when the talking heads talk about the fact that, it's not going to affect you, right? A Walmart can force a company to eat the cost. Well, not half the economy is small business, and those wholesalers are going to pass the cost to those small businesses that are either going to have to make some very hard decisions how they're going to operate. And I'll give you one of my favorite examples coming up is Manila. you can't make vanilla in America. You can create artificial vanilla, but you can't grow vanilla beans here. It's climate impossible. So a lot of vanilla beans come from Southeast Asia and from Madagascar in particular. Everyone knows Madagascar vanilla, and it's anywhere between $10 to $25 an ounce.
Hmm.
It's a trade deficit country. Madagascar is a trade deficit country. They sell us more than they buy. But if you know anything Madagascar, and you're welcome to Google it, they have no money. This
I was
is
going to say, what else have they got? Yeah.
they've got nothing. They're getting paid, depends if you want to ask what a reasonable wage is, because of course reasonable wage depends where you live. But they literally have no money to buy US goods.
Right.
Like literally, right? But your bakery down the street from you depends on natural vanilla because people want to have natural product, not artificial flavors. As we move away from that concept of artificial flavors, people want natural vanilla, which can or triple price depending on the tariff. And the Trump administration wants countries to buy more of our stuff, but what if you are economically impossible to do that? Just jack up more. And by the way, you all know smart business. You don't sell to places that no one can buy because now you're wasting your money trying to sell something that doesn't exist. It's like, what's the joke? Selling ice to Eskimos?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Why would you sell ice to places where there are plenty of ice, right? And we can talk about the penguins too if you want. I mean, and also the military base. They tariffed a military base that's a foreign-owned, I believe, Australian-owned property, but basically is controlled by the U.S. government. So they just tariffed its own military base.
Yeah, it does seem like there was not a lot of thought put into this kind of blanket tariffs.
Well, the blanket tariff is there. Everybody's ignoring China, Mexico, and Canada. Everybody on the planet has been hit by 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Imports are 10%. And the market is kind of confused about this. I'm sure you're listening confused too, because we heard this 9-day suspension. Oh no, the 10% is still there. Everyone's hit by 10%. Even countries where we have a trade surplus. Britain is a trade surplus to us. They buy more from us than they sell to us.
Mm-hmm.
Colombia, as we discovered, is another one. They're a weird trade deficit country because of the coffee.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. They can't afford to buy anything from us, but you like your coffee. I think most people do, and 40% of your coffee comes from one place. Right. The more we smack around Central America and South America, coffee's going to get really expensive.
Right. Yes.
You like chocolate, you better save some money or hoard now. Because those tariffs will have adverse effect. But the 10% is already in there because as I think you may have read it in the news, the formula makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
The tariff is a government implementing a policy, whether by a vote of the legislature or the executive branch, where they're going to tariff a percentage of goods coming in. The Trump administration, decided to determine what a tariff is there's all these intangibles that they're trying to tangible, which is impossible to tangify. That's not a word, but make it tangible. By just taking the number of the trade deficit and just divided by what they buy from us, and that's the percentage. And
right.
And if it's a trade surplus country, meaning that they buy more from us than we do buy from them, it's the baseline is still 10%, which means they lie to us. It's not reciprocal. If they just flat out lied, it's not reciprocal taxation, where if you use that formula, it means that's a net positive. So inversely, we should be paying them tax.
Right. Yeah. Which is not happening. Yeah.
Which is not happening, right? So this is again disingenuous of what they're doing.
Yeah, and two other questions too that have not really been asked or answered with this tariff situation is, number one, does the president have the authority to do this unilaterally, or does he need approval from Congress? And number two, what's happening to all this new revenue from these tariffs?
Well, the answer is that under the U.S. Constitution, power taxation and tariffs actually is in the purview of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Congress has ceded some of those tariff powers over many years to the president under different types of conditions. And one talks about the Smoot-Hawley tariffs back in the Great Depression in the 1930s under Herbert Hoover. But the Congress can give presidential power to utilize in very specific conditions. And the Trump administration, much to the credit, has been creating very broad legal arguments regarding presidential power. Now, whether Congress will take back that power, your guess is as good as mine, because prior to liberation of our money, the U.S. Senate had sufficient votes to repeal a lot of the tariffs that the president wanted to put on Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Where they didn't have a veto proof, and there was no conversation in the House of whether they want to do it. So pressure's on. And the EU put more pressure on because they went after agricultural products first, which are predominantly Republican represented areas.
Mm-hmm.
And the Canadians did the same, putting pressure on Congress. And the congressmen, as you know, don't represent whole states. As a result, depends specific geographic areas will be impacted versus senators who represent those states. Since they represent the whole state, they know it's going to be a statewide impact. And they very much transmitted this. The Canadians were not shy. They basically told everybody where we're coming now. You can look it up yourself, but they basically told Congress, we're coming. We're coming for you because you're coming for us. And same thing with the EU. And, the response, from the Trump administration, well, just accept it and it'll work out fine. I mean, you tell me, someone comes punch you in the face, we're going to just sit there and take it? I mean, common sense, people. If someone comes punches you, you're going to sit there and say, keep punching me? Right. It's going to work out okay? I mean, it's these interesting statements that if you believe that, then clearly you like being punched in the head by other people. Common sense. This is called common sense.
Yeah, and it's under the guise of declaration of emergencies because of the import of fentanyl from China, Canada, Mexico.
Well, let's go to the moving target argument now, which you can accuse me of doing that too if you want to, but I like to present scenarios and options rather than say I'm giving you a moving target answers. Because conspiracy theory folks love moving target answers. I mean, if they lose one argument, they keep moving the benchmark around. It's just how it works, right? Whether it be aliens or vaccines, I don't care. They always keep moving these targets around because if an argument is debunked, then they would just keep changing the metric. And if you only believe the conspiracy, you don't care what the metrics are. I have to be honest with you, right? You're just going to accept it. It's like flat earth people. No matter what you do, if they debunk one fact, they'll move to another, try to make you debunk that one so they continue the conspiracy, right? So again, this is a rule of conspiracies. Now, the Trump administration, has made multiple arguments, and it's not a conspiracy argument. It's multiple choice arguments. Pick the one you like. So using very broad interpretation of their powers, which is give them credit. I mean, every president does it. It's not uniquely a Republican issue. Democrats do it too. Okay, this is an executive power thing to try to laws broadly to give executive power more power. This is not a political issue in terms of party. This is just how executive branches work. And the arguments have moved around. So, for example, you asked about the tariff income, right? If it's 10% tariffs and it's $1.9 trillion of imports, that means you got $290 billion if those numbers hold up and there's no reduction of consumption. If you don't reduce consumption, then, they have $290 billion. Now, that does not close the deficits by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. No, it's in the trillions, I think, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about, it's the size of our GDP intake of cash is closer to trying to close the deficit than the deficit that's there. Okay, so, but again, every little bit helps. So let's put that on the table. Every little bit helps. So then it becomes like, okay, it's fentanyl and undocumented and people coming into the country as criminals. Okay, we use this kind of wall power taps. People like that idea. Great. Oh, we're going to generate income. But if you buy less, then you don't get much money you want. And if you keep delaying everything and moving targets, are we actually generating money? Okay, fine. You don't buy the fentanyl argument. I'm going to buy the tax argument. Oh, then it's going to be like onshoring. We're going to force businesses to come back to this country. And by the way, we're going to force foreign businesses back to this country. Okay, now yet another argument, right? And they're going to continue this thing of, oh, we're going to generate you a lot of wealth. Lots of wealth is going to be generated. After, and they're not wrong. Historically, the stock market over long periods of time to recover from losses. No, I have no clue what the recovery is when you're down 70% of the market, but a recovery of some form always happens in the long term. But in the near term, that's a different conversation. right? So, oh, we're going to make you a lot of money. So, I mean, they're into multiple choice arguments. One could argue that all of them are valid, or you as the public pick the one you like.
Right.
And the Kenzie will keep bringing up new ones like, oh, we brought down the bond market because we just destroyed the stock market. That means you have more capital to borrow. Then this week, overnight, the bond market jumped from 3.7 to 4.4, 4.5 in the 10-year bond yield. And bonds are traded in open market. Again, a large part of the general public is part of the market system, whether it be bonds or stocks. And suddenly they reverse course really quickly, putting this delay on because now they just made it much more expensive to borrow. Because a 10-year bond, if you go to a bank, it's not a 10-year bond on a 4.3%. You always assume you add 2 additional percent for the bank. So it becomes over 6%. When it was under 4%, they can argue we have, got your interest rates under 6%. It's probably the target number right now of the administration, without saying it's a target number, but now it's risen above 6%, and there's potential it could rise to 9%, depending on how much they screw up this whole thing, because when you don't like the stock market, you flee to safety in bonds. But then gold prices fell. The dollar fell. The objective of the administration is to weaken the US dollar to encourage people to buy more of our exports. However, if they tariff our exports at whatever percentages, it defeats the point of reducing the strength of the dollar.
Right.
And then, like Vietnam screams out and Israel screams out, zero tariffs, we're going to zero tariffs. They don't want to do it because you're really exporting goods from China and there. But U.S. companies were basically told during the Trump administration, part one, to leave China, so they went to Vietnam.
Right.
So Cambodia, Vietnam is 90% tariffs, and they do a lot of textiles. Vietnam's like 47%, Cambodia is 90% on textile. And I also learned through Singapore News that there's also the WTO tariffs of parity. So there's actually a 10% parity tariff on the entire planet of who's part of the WTO, World Trade Organization. That's actually on top of the tariff. So basically you pay the tariffs of the country first, and then you tax another 10% on top of that.
Oh boy.
So there's another part that the administration didn't tell you about, but if you watch international news, who really talks about international trade, you realize there's a lot more going on here than you realize on the tariffing issue on a big picture level. Not being conveyed correctly domestically on the news, which means you're not being properly informed and educated about how this tariff system works. Because I almost bit my tongue when I saw the words. Oh, by the way, there's a WTO tariff that creates equity among all countries regarding countries that don't have big tariff systems, right? Particularly smaller countries, right? And I'm just like, oh dear. Yeah. So it's much more involved than people realize. And smaller countries are going to be a disadvantage against larger countries, and poorer countries will always be a disadvantage against wealthier countries. This is just a fact of life. And if you expect, countries to take away the VAT because the administration talks about it, does anyone know what a VAT really is, a value-added tax? It's called a sales tax.
Okay.
US is one of the few countries that does not have a federal sales tax. They talk about it, but never going to do it. They do have an excise tax. So there is a sales tax on specific goods, namely alcohol and tobacco.
Right.
So you are actually taking a federal sales tax in a weird way. Same thing on the gas tax. Yeah, it's a type of sales tax, but it's not a blanket product tax. Massachusetts has a sales tax. But there are exemptions. Food, periodicals, certain things are exempt from the sales tax in Massachusetts. Not all states are the same. Some states tax everything. And other countries do a universal sales tax because they don't have regional governments that can tax on their own. Right. Only the federal government in those countries can tax. And especially in small countries, you don't need regional government taxing because the country is small enough that the federal government does it. So why did they have this basic universal sales tax, which the administration called value-added tax? It's because it pays for things like universal health care. It pays for roads. It helps address the fact that they don't have strong income tax system. The Trump administration is trying to influence other countries' tax policies to the tariffs war. That's going to be a problem because every country's tax policy is designed around whatever's going on in that country and their needs. So this is actually an interesting thing that analysts are looking at, is the fact that he's actually literally trying to change global tax policy in other countries where the supermajority of countries have some type of value-added tax, which is a sales tax, a universal sales tax set by the federal government.
Well, stay tuned because there's nowhere it's going to go from here.
I can't predict it either. I mean, obviously, I had stated I was in the office yesterday, obviously, and I told the staff that this 2,900 point jump in the Dow yesterday, being Wednesday, then April 9th, so we have some context here. I expected that today people would flee to safety, that would start selling stocks and mutual funds and bonds in their 401ks. And if you have a 529, which is, again, your college fund for your kids, there's available. I can see massive sell-offs, particularly for individual folks to flee to cash and safety, to ride out the storm rather than take some more losses.
Right.
Again, I strongly advise everybody to talk to a financial advisor. Don't rely on me for financial advice. Please talk to a financial advisor. And again, it's statistically long-term, well, the market will beat interest rates, any bank interest rate and a bond in the long term. So, but again, you really should consult your financial planners before you make hasty decisions on your own.
Oh, for sure. Everybody's situation is different depending on where you are in life. Yeah.
Yeah, I participate in the States 457 since my 20s. I put, $100 here, $50 there, over time. And eventually, as I made a little extra money, I put a little more in. But I got an email today from Empower, who is the contractor for the state treasurer who operates the 457 program. And the 457 is nothing like a 401k. Just trust me on this. This 401k is so much better than what I get to use. But they sent me an email, hey, we got virtual advisors ready to go before you start doing something hasty. Please call us before you do something hasty, and we'll talk about how to manage your retirement money going forward. And obviously, I still got more than a couple of years away, but if you're closer to 67 or 60, 62 or whatever age, obviously this is going to change your outlook right today. It's changing your outlook how you're going to do your retirement plans. It reminds me of 2008, 2007, right? Financial crisis. That forced older people to work much longer they would like to have worked because they got wiped out, during that time period. Same thing happened in the saving and loan scandal in the late 90s. People got wiped out, right? Then, we had the dot-com bust. A lot of people got wiped out, not necessarily just threes, right? And we had two huge recessions within a 10-year period, at the end of George W. Bush and throughout the entire Obama administration. People undercredit President Obama on trying to manage this country to basically two recessions back to back, which is statistically very abnormal. So, we had a good, strong period of the economy, which also created a good period for the markets. But if the bonds were really low because interest rates were too low. I mean, so the answer is I don't know the answer. I just know that I'm just presenting you what I've observed watching all this stock news, and human behavior is always going to be protect yourself. Big surprise. Also, don't forget, the United States drives the global markets. As you saw, Japan fell and Europe fell when the US fell.
That's right. Yes. And they just bounce back as well.
And the consumers here, spend money on imports that basically is the equivalent of the next three countries below us combined. And we stop spending, it hurts everybody. It really does. It hurts the global economy. And also, it also keeps the US dollar strong. So there's all this talk about the dollar being not the reserve currency. If we buy the most, then you're going to do it in our currency. End of story. Interestingly enough, if the Trump administration's able to accomplish what they want, where where people buy more of U.S. products, it should theoretically strengthen the dollar even more. But if they flee the U.S. economy and decide to do smaller trading groups, like the EU as a trade bloc, ASEAN, Asian, Southeast Asians trading bloc, they form new trading blocs where they have lower tariffs. It could devalue the dollar because there's less U.S. dollars being utilized in trade because people aren't doing business with us.
Right. Yep.
Again, these are macro kind of, I don't know what's going to happen scenarios. But, today we drive global markets. Today we drive the global economy. Today we drive commerce. And people should not feel that or believe anything people say about the decline of America. I hate the word American exceptionalism because it's a very peculiar term. I think the better way is that we are still in a global economy, whether you believe that or not. When I say that next three countries below us don't spend as much as we do on imports in their countries, that means we have wealth.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to all those penguins who are going to wonder how come we're tariffing their snow. So, okay, I couldn't resist the penguin joke. I really couldn't.
Darn those penguins, they need to pay their fair share.
They need to buy more U.S. product. They need to buy stuff from us. So, yeah, it's also a degree of embarrassment because you think about it, other countries do review this, other countries' economists review this, our economists review this. This is also embarrassing. You may not think so because, oh, no, it doesn't affect me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but, this is embarrassing as all the other countries look at this. And they're like, if the president's tariff numbers are not the actual numbers they tariff the United States, how do you negotiate? So someone said it best, Cambodia is at 90%. They're a poor country, very poor country relative to us. They cannot afford to buy U.S. products.
Right.
And they start at 90%. And they're like at 2.5 against us. So in theory, it should be somewhere, what number?
Well, I mean, to make up the difference, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. Your guess is going in mine where they don't actually tariff us at 90%. Again, this is kind of this made up number using the trade deficit versus imports they take and just come up a percentage against a country that is not a wealthy country.
Yeah.
Which is why there's a deficit. Plus U.S. investment is why the country is actually becoming a stronger country because we buy and make and manufacture there because of U.S. businesses, which actually makes them actually better quality of life. This is much more complicated than they let on at the federal level.
Yeah, and it it erodes trust also. In trading with the United States and even traveling to the United States, I'm sure.
Oh, well, yeah, we talked about last time how Canadian tourism was down 70%. The U.S. dollar has been so strong, it's been difficult for international travel to the United States because they need money coming to visit. They don't spend as much as they could potentially spend in the United States because the dollar's too strong. And this is unwelcome. I mean, normally when you get like this government political stuff, generally most people in other countries are kind of like, okay, it's our prime minister being an ass or whatever, and his president, they're fighting each other. Yeah, everyone's taking it pretty personal right now.
Yes.
This is different. This is very different. People in other countries, like the regular people, are taking it very personal right now. It's not those people saying, oh, politicians are politicians. They're just being jerks, right? No, they're taking it really personal at the local level. This is very different.
Yes, when they're booing United States sports teams at different games, that's personal.
Oh yeah, and they're gonna favor local product over U.S. product. Alcohol is one of the industries that follow very closely. Constellation Brands announced massive problems on beer sales, including the fact that these GLP-1 fat drugs, diabetes drugs, are actually impact selling alcohol because it reduces craving for alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But they're having a global sale problem, and tariffs actually very major impact on you buying alcohol because you already pay excise taxes. Maybe not in Massachusetts, but in other states, they pay sale taxes on top of those excise taxes. They have to pay a tariff tax, and then again, the products move back and forth depending on what kind of raw product we're talking about. So if they're importing barley from U.S. to make rye whiskey, that's tariff coming to that country because they put tariffs against us. Then that rye whiskey comes back to the United States, it's tariffed again, and it's built into the price structure for the consumer. Conversely, we can't get anything out of the country because nobody's buying our stuff. It's going to deflate the prices of that whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might get a bargain now. It'll be like during COVID, right? During COVID, restaurants were not buying any hard liquor because it was just COVID. Everything was closed. So liquor stores in Massachusetts were carrying high brand hard liquor at actually quite a discount at the time because they just got to get stuff off the shelves. They had to move stuff off inventory. So again, I know COVID's from 5 years ago, but how quickly we forget certain types of economic impacts, which is not dissimilar to the tariff situation where foreign countries are not going to buy our product. You're going to try to sell it here at a discount, which then adversely affects their business too because they're taking losses.
Right. Yep. We can go on all day, Tacky, but we can't because I just looked at the clock and our hour is up.
Yeah, no, I've been paying too much attention. Again, part of being consumer professional relations chair is that I actually do look at alcohol industry as one of my purviews. I've been paying a lot more attention since COVID about the alcohol industry and how it operates on a not just Massachusetts level, but on a global level, which then trickles to things like Michigan consumer confidence, because we're paying attention to that a lot during COVID to get a sense of where consumer confidence was, which again, consumer protection guy, which continues to today from 5 years deep and stuff they were paying attention 5 years ago. And energy markets and things like lumber means cardboard. We didn't have cardboard because we were making test kits of cardboard, so no one could buy cardboard. Now we have tariffs on wood, which then creates a problem for cardboard. And if we have a toilet paper run, I'll be like, oh, really? We're gonna do this again? But yeah, I mean, it's intricate. And the president also announced tariffs on pharma,
Yes.
which no one knows what that means, to be honest with you. No one knows what
Right.
that means. What farmer? Which part of farmer? Is it Tylenol being taxed? Is your vaccines and being taxed? Is the biotech drugs that actually help my mom being taxed? I no clue what they're talking about still. No one knows what they're talking about. So,
Right.
does this affect you as a individual consumer? The answer is yes.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. We're all in it together for sure.
We are. So, in our world, House budget recommendations coming out next Wednesday. Our amendments are due next Friday. We'll go to debate the week after Patriots Day, most likely the 28th of April. So in my world, things are picking up too on that front. And my first public hearing as committee chair, working my co-chair in this very different environment we're operating under the rules, actually kicks off on Monday.
Oh, okay. Things are starting to heat up then. Okay.
Yeah, we're doing softballs. I always do this every session. We try to make the first hearing relatively easy on purpose to see how it goes. If things work out, we continue the same work pattern. If it doesn't work out, we better make adjustments before the next hearing. So the first hearing will be intentionally light just to see how this would play. It was like when we had the video for the first time.
Yep.
Light hearing for like an hour just to see if this technology was going to work, and it didn't work. So
right.
as,
Yes.
as you can tell, I'm a very systematic guy on how to do things around here, that we will test it and then see if it's successful or not before we dive too deep into it. But yeah, no, things are picking up. I have 12 hearings scheduled between now and November.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, we're still not sure how we're going to roll it out. So yeah, I'm getting busier, folks. Not to mention events are picking up and so forth.
Right.
You want to know where I'm living, guys? It's obviously I'm home today, but I was in the State House yesterday. Room 42 was still there. The staff is there. And obviously call us at 617-722-2370, 617-722-2370. Please call us if you got an emergency issue. Don't email me, because it's not like I live and breathe and sit on my phone every 4 seconds. But you can email me, tackey.chan at mahouse.gov, tackey.chan at mahouse.gov. We do have the state representative Tacky Chan Facebook. We have at Tacky Chan on X, so we have a social media. TackyChan.org is our resource page. Also another contact page. We have malegislature.gov. malegislature.gov is the legislature website. Strongly encourage everyone to go there to look at bills, as well as create a login site for themselves. Obviously, we have QATV here with Joe every week or 2 weeks. Sometimes we miss a couple, but we're going to be together as often as we can. And obviously check with Joe in the morning as well for his 10, 20, well, actually it's about 10 minutes, Quincy update on news, which actually includes things like markets overseas, to give you an idea that things that, you can hear from Joe yourself on the impact of foreign markets and how U.S. markets are tied to foreign markets. And yeah, if you got a question you want to have answered, email Joe directly. And Joe can sort through the emails and he can decide what we should talk about next.
Yep, we'd love to hear from folks. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jackie.
No, thank you, Joe. We'll catch you again soon.